Hello and welcome to 365 Days of Excelling with Clive. This is day 119 and today we are looking at query editing. Particularly, we are looking at the difference between duplicate query and reference query. So if you go to a query, if you remember yesterday we looked at we used duplicate queries. So if you right click on a query, you can see there is duplicate and there is reference. So yesterday I did mention that these are almost similar functionalities, but today we are going to look at the differences and the benefits of using either of the two. So yesterday what we did is we duplicated the query. So if I open this query to edit it, so I want to edit it, and you can see the steps here. Let me just take a screenshot of these steps. So these are the steps on this particular query, which is monthly files. Then if I go to grouped table and bring the steps next to each other, you can see that the steps are exactly similar to each other except the last one. So I copied exactly this query here into another query by duplicating it, and I added one extra step, which is just to group the data. But what you can see here is that all these steps here were done in this first query. I have them duplicated here, which is spending unnecessary time trying to transform the data again, which have been already transformed. And if I had made a mistake, for example, in this particular step, and now I want to change it, but I also want this other second query to change, it means I will have to go through two different queries editing them. Sometimes you might need to duplicate the query or to have the same copy of the query 3 times, 4 times, and just do extra changes to the query. So it then becomes inefficient for you to duplicate the queries, because if you want to change one simple thing, then you have to make changes to all the queries that you have duplicated. So let me just show you what I mean. So if, for example, I then decide later on that, okay, here where I renamed the column, okay, let me just go where I removed the column here. I removed column source name, and I realized that no, I should have not removed it, and I delete that step. Then I go to this other query here. You can see that the changed or removed column is still there. So which means I have to remove it again here so that it can take effect into this other second query. Let me just close without saving so that I can get back my removed column here. Now I want to demonstrate a reference query. So reference query, what does is it takes whatever the result of the first query and uses it to do additional transformations. So if I want the changes in the first query to take effect and be used in the second query, I can use reference queries. So here's just a simple illustration of the difference between reference query and edit query. So we have query number 1 is Q1 here. Then we have query number 2. Here we are using reference query. So we have query number 2 and we have query number 3. Okay. So let's suppose what you want to happen is if you make changes in query number 1, you want those changes to filter through to query number 2. So there, what you are going to use is reference, because reference takes whatever the end result is. If you do extra transformations, extra changes, whatever the final answer which you get from this query, you just want to reference to that and bring it into query number 2. Whereas duplicate queries, it's when you want to get exactly the same copy of this query, and if you do any other changes on this original query, you don't want them to filter through to your second query. So that's where you use duplicate. Here you use reference. Duplicate, it just means that you have two same queries and they work independent. So if they are fetching files from the folder, this will start fetching files directly from the folder, and this will search files from the folder. And you can choose to change the source of this one and keep the source of this one, the original one. But with this one, you cannot change the source independent to this one. So when you change the source of the original one, it means the source also is being filtered through to your second query. So the advantage of reference query, as you have noted, is that it's lightweight because you are taking the end result and doing only additional transformations. So your query is not going to do all the transformations that were done here all over again, but it's just going to take the end answer, which is already a transformed answer, and use it to do further transformations. Whereas the duplicate query, you are going to have two different queries linking to the same source folder, and if they are linking to a server which needs internet connections, it means you are going to use twice as much data as you would need to use if you use reference queries. So let's just go straight and do the reference query and see how it works. Okay, so if I say reference query, you can see it's now saying reference query or monthly files true. So I'll just say referenced files. Now let's compare and contrast. Now you have the referenced query rather. We have referenced query. You can see the source here is monthly files. So it's referencing to monthly files. Whereas if I go to the duplicate queries, I can rename it and call it duplicate. Duplicate query, you can see the source is still referencing to my folder, to the downloads folder where I have my files, and it's running all the transformations which are exactly the same transformations as in my original file. But the reference query have only one additional step it's adding, which is pulling from the source, and I can do further transformations from here. And likewise, as I said, that if I want to take out one step, for example, if I want to take out the removed columns here, so here I'm removing the source name, and if I remove this column and bring back the source name here and open the referenced query, I should see this source name now appearing. You can see the source name is now appearing. So that's the referenced query, and this is the duplicate query, which is exactly a copy of the original, and it gets edited independently of the original query. So that's it, guys, with the reference queries and the duplicate queries. So use them wisely, and also note that using duplicate queries might make your workbook very slow, especially when you are querying a lot of data. So consider as far as possible to use a referenced query. But also another thing to just be aware of, if you know that you want to make additional changes in this original file and you don't want those changes to filter through to your copy or to your new query, then you have to use a duplicate, because if you use the reference query, some of the transformations you might have done in the reference query might not work properly because you have done additional steps in the original file. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you. Bye-bye.